First off, let me thank Walt and Branch 2184 for the invitation. Of all my duties, this is one of my favorite, is coming out to these types of events. Because as y'all can imagine, we're stuck in a building in Washington, D.C. in our office, and don't get to interact with letter carriers very often. Most of the people that work in the building are professionals. They're not letter carriers. And because of that, they don't understand us, and we really don't understand them most of the time. So anyway, and I'll try to talk a little bit slower. I know I talk real fast, and y'all may not understand my accent, so I'll try to slow it down a little bit. But first, before I get into the contract stuff, I do want to recognize a group of people in here, of which I am one, and it's very appropriate as tomorrow is the day that they'll be nationally recognized. So if all the veterans in the room would please stand up and be recognized. And as you'll hear 1,000 times tomorrow, thank you for your service. So let me talk a little bit about the contract. Of course, your National Business Agent, David Mudd, was part of the negotiation team. The way we structured it this round is similar to the way we've structured it in past rounds. We brought in the Executive Council, the National Business Agents, the 3 trustees, and the 10 resident officers. And we divided those folks up into groups and assigned them different portions of the contract, the handbooks, and the manuals to review, to come up with proposals that we could then submit to the Postal Service. That's on the work rules side, okay? You also have the economic side. That's all the money, okay? So let me talk a little bit about the work rules side first. So when they came in and developed these proposals, they developed over 200 proposals and had dropped them in my lap, which created a whole lot of work for me, because then it was my job to get with the Postal Service and start negotiating these things. To put that into perspective of how much work they did on behalf of the letter carriers, in the prior contract, we did the same thing or something very similar, and they developed about 70 proposals. So this time it was over 200. So they really worked very hard going through the different parts of the contract, the handbooks, and the manuals to try to find things that they could do, that we could propose, that would improve the work lives of letter carriers on the workroom floor. So from that, some of the provisions we came up with was Article 8. Have y'all heard about the Article 8 provisions? So this is actually a negotiation position of NALC. And so what does that mean? How many of y'all have been delegates to a national convention? So when you're sitting out there on the floor and we're debating proposed amendments or proposals to the National Convention, what you're doing is you're setting bargaining strategy. So when a proposal is passed, a resolution is passed, then what you're telling the Executive Council is, we want you to attempt to negotiate this in future contracts, okay? We have resolutions that go back to the 1970s that are still open resolutions that are still official bargaining positions of NALC. And so part of my job was to review all that stuff, all those resolutions that have been passed in previous conventions, and then and make sure that we're not negotiating anything that's contradictory to that, and more so, make sure that we negotiate things, or to attempt to negotiate those positions. So out of that is how we got to the Article 8. So it has been a position of the NLC dictated from the conventions that we create additional lists and additional ways that people can work overtime. So again, that's what we did this round of bargaining. So now, used to you had 2 overtime lists. You had a work assignment list, you had the overtime desire list. If you were on the overtime desire list, you were all in, right? Overtime, anytime, anyhow. So what we did is we split that list. So now you have the ability to, if you want overtime only on your regular scheduled work day, you have the ability to sign that list and only work on your regular scheduled day. If you want overtime on your non-sched day, but not be available on your regular scheduled day, then you can sign that list. So some of the benefits, and I carried mail for 21 years in Roswell, Georgia, actively before I became a full-time officer. And some of the things that I saw was you would have young families that have a letter carrier with a young family, and they needed to get off at a certain time in the afternoon because they had daycare issues, right? Well, if they signed overtime desire list, they had to be available to work overtime, and that prevented them from signing that list. So it hampered their ability to work overtime. You also have other people that they don't care how many hours they work once they get up to hopefully take a shower and put on the uniform, but they don't want to work their non-sched day. They want a day off every week. And so this gives the ability you can decide if you want to work your non-sched, not be available on a regular day. You can decide if you want to work your regular day, but not be available on your non-sched, or you can sign both lists and you're exactly where you're at right now. So that's one of the provisions. Now, what jumps out at everybody is, well, how are we going to deal with equitability, right? And that's something we're going to have to work through. Basically, equitability will be applied to each list individually. So the folks that are on the non-sched day list, they have to be made equitable with the same folks that are on that list. The folks that are on the working their regular day, they have to be made equitable. If you're on both lists, you were made equitable over here as well as equitable over here. So that's the way it'll work. Now, we were talking, Dave and I and some of your members were talking earlier about educating the Postal Service on this. We won't have a problem with it because we educate our folks. Letter carriers will figure it out real quick, and our stewards will file the appropriate grievances, and our branch presidents will move them on up the chain. So we won't have an issue with this. Where the problem comes in is on the management side. So what we got commitments that if this contract is ratified, that we'll do trainings joint trainings with the Postal Service and the offices to make sure they understand what their roles and responsibilities are in this. So again, hopefully, if the contract's ratified, these provisions go into effect, we'll have a smooth transition. One of the other pieces that came out of this deals with Article 16.7, which is another area that management abuses routinely. So they'll take our carriers and they'll place them out on 16.7, which is a provision that allows them to immediately put a letter carrier off the clock out on the street, okay? So that they don't have any income coming in, and the problem with it is there's no defined time frame in which management can keep them out on the clock. And so they have abused this over and over again, and we have letter carriers, unfortunately, across this country that have been out on 16.7s in a non-pay status for months. And in the process, they lose their homes, their cars, their dogs, their wives, their whatever. And so something that management uses, they weaponize it and use it as a tool to gain whatever compliance they're trying to gain out of that particular letter carrier. So what we did is we negotiated a provision where letter carriers can now use their annual leave to cover that period of time that they're out on 16.7. And if they prevail in the grievance that's subsequently filed, then of course they would get that annual leave restored so that they wouldn't be out there in that lost pay status. We feel like that is going to greatly enhance or greatly reduce the amount of abuse and weaponization that management is employing with this 16.7 stuff. So anyway, somebody up there dancing, I don't know what we tied into. That might be more interesting to me, so if y'all turn around, you're not going to hurt my feelings. So, but anyway, there's a lot of other provisions for our newer employees. I know when I started carrying mail back in 1987, I had to build an annual leave balance before I could take it. So what we've done is we've negotiated where letter carriers' PTFs will be advanced 40 hours of annual leave, so that when they, as soon as they get there, they'll have a leave balance so that they can plan stuff, take time off. If you're CCA, you'll be, after your first term, you'll be advanced 40 hours of annual leave. So again, that gives them a little bit of leave time. I'm an employer as a union officer. I have about 400 employees that work for us at NALC that are non-letter carriers. They walk in the door. That doesn't mean that their lives start over as soon as they walk in the door. They still routinely, they'll come to me and say, well, my daughter's getting married, or I need to go to my high school reunion, or whatever, and so they need time off. They walk in the door needing time off. Well, we're the same way. When we're hired, doesn't mean our lives start from that point on. There's things that we had scheduled prior to being hired to post service. So this will give them the opportunity to take some leave and be able to continue with their lives and not be so disruptive. Another provision for newer employees is when I started in Roswell, is kind of like you were thrown into the fire and figured out. Fortunately, back then we didn't have scanners and all this other stuff, so the seasoned carriers would come out and help you and make sure you were taken care of and get you through your 90-day probationary period, and we looked out for each other. Unfortunately, the environment we work in now doesn't allow for that, because if you leave your route and without authorization go to help somebody, they're going to be able to detect it and figure that out. So what we did is we negotiated a piece where new carriers would be given, their hours would be limited for several weeks after they first start. And then also they would be guaranteed a day off, so that they're not thrown out there and working these long hours with no rest breaks, and hopefully that will help retention rates. And we've been running that as a test across the country for a while. It's proven to help with the retention rates in the places where management is properly applying it. There have been test sites where management didn't properly apply it, and naturally we didn't see any favorable results. But again, that goes back to what I said about training. So that's, those are some of the highlights. There's a whole lot more. I could stand up here for 3 hours, which is what we did with these rap sessions when we went around the country and explained to you. But that's, as Walt said, that's not what we're here for today. So those are some of the highlights on the work rules side. So on the economic side, we abolished AA, A, and B. So letter carriers now will start at steps, what's equivalent now to step C. Maxed out letter carriers, Fred's last contract, Fred Rolando's last contract, he negotiated step P, but it was only partial pay step P. This we added to the step P, so now maxed out letter carriers, when you get step P, you'll be at $1,000 higher than what it was previously. Our GIs are 1.3 across the board. That's general increases. Those are the annual increases. Those are 1.3 across the board. And then we maintained our COLA provisions. Our COLA provisions are huge. If you go back over the history of NALC, our COLA provisions alone account for over half of our actual dollar increases. Okay, so those COLAs have a huge impact on our pay. We are one of the few organizations that still has COLAs. And let me tell you something, if anybody doesn't think they're under attack, you're wrong. And if anybody thinks that a neutral arbitrator out there isn't going to look at the environment of the rest of the country, you're wrong, because they do. That's their job. So again, you got to be careful when you start negotiating these things, and particularly if you decide to go to interest arbitration as to what you can lose. I was an arbitration advocate. I know there's a lot of folks in the room that were arbitration advocates. I talked to you your two former presidents up here that advocated cases. And any advocate's going to tell you that when you're sizing up a case, you don't look at what you can win, you look at what you can potentially lose. Because again, our job is to represent our members, and to do it in a way that is most beneficial to them. And so you have to look at what is out there that you could potentially lose when you go in front of an arbitrator. So again, that COLA piece is huge. So that's kind of where we're at with, there's other things that are baked into the economics, such as uniforms. We did, the uniform that whole process is broke. And we had discussions with the Postal Service about redoing that entire process. That's not a short-term fix. That's not anything we can do, within the negotiation period of this contract, but it's something that both parties are committed to doing after the contract has been either ratified or arbitrated, whichever way it goes. So, because they know it's broke, they're just as pissed off as we are, because they feel like every time they give us an increase on their uniform allotment, it doesn't give us better, nicer, more uniforms. What it does is it gives the uniform companies more money. And they raise their rates as soon as the Postal Service raises our stuff. So anyway, that's something we'll be continually dealing with. So where are we at now? We are in the tentative agreement process. The Constitution says that once the tentative agreement has been reached, that who gets to decide whether it becomes a contract or not? The members. We're a very democratic union. So once we squeezed the Postal Service as hard as we could squeeze them, and we knew that they weren't going to give us any more, then, constitutionally, we're obligated to bring it to you to let you ratify it. And the members, active members ratify it. All the retirees in here, sorry, but you'll get to play in this arena because it doesn't affect the retired members. The active regular members get to determine whether or not the contract is ratified or not. If it's not ratified, then we have constitutionally there's a 15-day window in which we go back to the Postal Service and try to negotiate. That will likely not have any positive outcome. It will not change anything. And then at that point, we would solicit dates from the national arbitrator to move forward in arbitration. So again, I'm not going to stand up here and sell you on whether or not you should vote yes or no. That's not, using my title to do that would not be appropriate, because it's an individual decision. Everybody has to assess the economic environment that they're in. They have to assess the work climate environment that they're in. And the analogy I always use is that if you're in a little old town in South Georgia, my home state is Georgia, so I'll use it. If you're in a little old town in South Georgia and you've got this contract, you're probably one of the wealthiest people in the town. And you complain about that contract, a bunch of folks will say, well, move out of my way, I'll take that. But if you're in San Francisco, California, this contract's not going to do a whole lot for you. It's not going to improve on your economic condition. There's other considerations that people use. We have, every time we do a contract, we have a number of people that are looking at that contract and make a decision whether they're going to retire or not. And that, again, is an individual decision. So I may be casing mail right next to Dave Mudd, and because I'm looking at it from a different perspective, he may think it's not a good contract. I may say, well, that's exactly what I need to make my mind up. So again, it's an individual decision. That's why every active member, regular member, has a voice in a vote. If there was one decision to fit all, Brian Renfro would make it. But it's not. It's an individual decision. And we want each person to read it, to ask whatever questions you got, understand as best you can, apply your economic situation, your working environment, I always tell people if I had to carry mail in Fargo, North Dakota, they'd have to pay me $500,000 a year to do that. So, so again, it's the climate you're working in and whether or not it fits your needs. So, I'll be, as Walt said, I'll be willing to take any questions y'all have. I know, that's a very, very small snapshot of it, but I did want everybody to understand where we're at. Yes, sir.
Could you advise our members where they should go, what's the best place to get that information, to read the contract, read the information?
So the tentative agreement is on the NALC website, so that should be your first stop. Your second stop should be, reach out to your branch presidents. Hopefully they, and I know Walt did because I saw him there, he got to the mic a couple of times, was at route sessions. Ask them, hey, I don't understand this, what's this impact going to be, or that sort of thing. Your national business agent, NALC headquarters, I get calls every day about the tentative agreement. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, whether it's here or when I get back to DC. So again, that's, reach out. Don't assume something. Don't cast your vote without knowing everything that you can possibly know about this contract, because it's your livelihood. It affects you, it affects your families, so again, we want an educated vote, not a political or whatever else vote. We want you to be educated and when you cast your ballot. Yes, sir.
Is TA the ground floor, like the worst we could do?
No, ma'am. So the question was, is the tentative agreement the worst we could do? What happens is if we decide to go to interest arbitration, that all goes away. The interest arbitrator doesn't need to consider it, doesn't see it, it's not part of the evidence, can't see it, okay? Because it was negotiations, so it's not something that they could consider. So our case before that interest arbitrator would start all over. So we would go in and we would ask for, increase in wages naturally, all the different stuff that you can imagine we would ask for. And the post service would go in and do the opposite. They would say, hey, you need to get rid of the COLAs. Nobody else has them out there. And one of the things that's problematic with the COLAs is that the COLAs outpace what the post service legally can increase rates by. So they can't even increase postage rates at the same rate that the COLA increases at. So when an arbitrator, and that's powerful testimony because they're going to bring in economists just like we will, and those economists are going to point out that that's they're going to always be at a loss, and that loss is that gap is going to be wider and wider as it continues. So again, we're going to ask to get rid of the non-career classification. That's one of our positions that we're taking. Naturally, again, we'd ask for wage increases and other provisions. So, but the arbitrator, here's what the arbitrator has to look at. They have to look at the economic factors involved. And again, I want you to be educated. So please don't take this as I'm trying to slant it one way or another. I just want you to know the facts. Our employer last year posted a $6 billion operational deficit. We expect our employer in a week from now to post an $8 billion loss this year. So the question I get a lot of times is, well, the Teamsters and they with UPS, they got this contract and the UAW and all these other unions, and they did. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that their employers are posting record profits. So when our employer is posting losses at that rate, and other employers are, that's not apples and orange comparison. So even though historically we use UPS as a benchmark for us because they're in the same industry, technically as we are, when we say, hey, we're comparable to them, that arbitrator has to look at, yeah, but what is your employer comparable? The work you do is comparable, but is your employer comparable? One is making a ton of money, the other one is losing a ton of money. So again, those are things, yes, sir.
Hey, Aaron Zoth out of Westland. I'm a big fan of helping out CCAs and, you know, people that just get converted, having them get quicker. Just out of curiosity, why would we jump them 3 steps and not everyone above them 3 steps?
That's a good question. So the question is, you know, why do we front end load the lower folks on the pay scale and not carry it all the way through the pay scale? We tried to negotiate carrying it all the way through the pay scale. Absolutely. You know, we took several different models to the Postal Service and tried to negotiate it. And again, you know, what we ended up with was not what we wanted by any means. But you know, again, you squeeze them as hard as you can squeeze them. Once the juice stops coming out, then it's the member's decision. You know, so that, you know, and so, but again, we put several models in front of them. You know, laterally moving everybody up. You know, a lot of different stuff. At the end of the day, they said, look, this is all the money we have. This is the pie, and you know, we can't expand the pie. The pie is what the pie is, and so y'all tell us how you want to break it up. And so, working within what they said was their max number, you know, we felt like that the fairest thing was, and what would be the most beneficial for retaining employees long term would be to jump the lower people up, and then again giving a little bit of bump at the end. The GIs, the GIs that we missed and the COLAs, keep in mind now, all that's going to be retro. So every letter carrier, if this thing is ratified, every letter carrier out there is going to get a retro amount that's going to be pretty sizable. 2 of the COLAs were $998. 1 of the COLAs was $300 and some odd, and then you've got the GIs that we missed out on. So again, there's going to be money on the table for everybody. But to your point, I would have loved to have lateraled everybody in so that, you know, if you're at step C now, you'd be F, and so on and so forth. But you know, again, you got to get somebody on the other side to nod their head to get it done, and they was nodding their head this way, not this way. So, you know, but that's a good question. You know, yes. How is management getting raises? So, y'all got to understand, we're the biggest craft in the Postal Service. Okay, there's more of us than there are of anybody else, and the percentage share of managers to letter carriers is minuscule. So to give them raises, even though they're getting raises, that dollar amount is nothing. Okay, because there's not that many of them. Every workroom floor you go on, you'll have 50 letter carriers, you'll have 2 or 3 managers, right? So, you know, so again, the numbers, that carve out for them, because there's so fewer of them than there are of us, that carve out for them, you know, that dollar amount doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. I'll tell you what, I'll leave that comment. I was going to say I would be a damn man for them for no amount of money, so whatever they get. Yes?
Now with that cost of living increase, is everyone getting that full amount, or is that a percentage based on your staff?
It works as a percentage based on where you're at. So if you're at top, that's the amount you get, and then it steps down gradually. Yeah.
So once again, the bill's getting ignored?
Well, I mean, I didn't say that, you said that. You know, again, it comes down, it's not that, and, you know, I want you to make, it piggybacks off of his question. We put forth many models to them you know, again, one of them was to lateral everybody 3 steps, move everybody up 3 steps. It's like everybody in here, I know, you know, it's very complex, but let me see if I can simplify it just a little bit. I know probably everybody in here has bought a car. And you go in the dealership, you say, okay, I want this car, I want these options on it, and here's what I'm willing to give for it. Well, if it was that easy and they said, okay, here's your car, give us that money, then we'd all be buying cars for $1, right? That's not how that works, and neither does it work that way in contract negotiations. So when you go to buy a car, you go in there and it's negotiation. You say, I want to give you $50,000. They say, no, I want 75. You know, I bump it up to 55. I want 72. So again, and at some point that juice is squeezed, all that juice is squeezed out. And then again, that's when we come and bring it to the members and say, vote. You know, and each person has to vote on it from their own perspective. Well, listen, anybody that has any questions, I'll be around for a while. You can feel free to talk to me. I'm sure David will field any questions you have. So feel free to do that. And thank you again for the invitation and being able to mingle with y'all and get to know you. Thank you.